Hello everyone and welcome back to the X-Ring. I hope you're doing well today. Today what I wanted to do with turnaround times being so quick on suppressors, I wanted to give my evaluation of suppressor covers and what you need to know about them. So stick around. So before we get started, one of the first things you need to ask yourself is what type of cover do you need and what platform is it on? And the reason I say this is because you're going to have different levels of heat for different types of applications. So if you have something like, let's say this Fly 9 by Thunderbeast Arms and it's 9mm, while they do get hot and they can burn you depending on the rate of fire, maybe you're in a training school or something like that, you might want to cover it, but at the same time, even with full burn downs, you're probably not going to get the suppressor, even on full auto fire, higher than about 800 degrees. Now, yeah, that's right. I did say 800 degrees, and it is very hot and will burn you instantly, but it's not something that you're going to generate as much heat as quickly as you would, let's say, a centerfire rifle suppressor, such as 5.56 or something like this 300 Win Mag. So the first question is, what is it going on? If it's going on a pistol or some type of handgun, you probably don't need a suppressor cover. But I will tell you that over sustained volumes of fire, you are going to see mirage. Now on a pistol, it doesn't matter. Most of us are using irons or dots, and you'll see a little bit of that mirage coming off of the actual suppressor itself. When you get into subguns, like I said, maybe not, depending on the application, I would always recommend running a suppressor cover, and the construction and all that is really going to matter. So when it comes to construction of the can, what it's made out of can also determine your volume of fire. If you have a suppressor that's, let's say, full titanium, it might not be full auto rated. You'll have to check with each manufacturer to see if that's the case, because titanium doesn't do well above temperatures of about 1,000 degrees or so. And so while it's great for most applications, just like, let's say, the Thunderbeast, I think I've got one here, the Ultra 7 or the Ultra 9, any of those. This is a full titanium can, and while it can take a lot, this is not something that you're going to want to run full auto on your 5.56. While you could do it for a little while, you're not going to do it long. Now, most of us aren't worried about full auto fire or anything, but that brings us to another point. What level of protection do you need from your suppressor cover? We'll get into that in just a moment. Now, I will tell you that with so many people running, short pistol ARs, this is a work gun that I had for years, and it does have a short barrel. This has about an 8-inch barrel or so, and I can tell you after just a couple of rounds, it will burn you badly. And the other thing is, when you're slinging these shorter SBRs or these pistol platforms, when you transition to a secondary, when you have it on a sling, what's going to happen is you're not only going to muzzle yourself probably in the thigh, but you're also going to burn your pants and everything else with it. This generates a lot of heat very, very quickly, and it will burn you very quickly. So now that we've talked about kind of like your needs and what you want with it, and especially guys, when you're running a magnified optic, especially for something like a long-range precision rifle, you want to make sure that you have some type of cover on there. Maybe not so much for getting burnt, but for stopping that mirage or mitigating that mirage from coming up and you seeing it through here. Now, not only do you have to deal with mirage for the environmental conditions, but now you're dealing with what heat is coming up off the suppressor. The suppressor is going to get substantially hotter than your barrel itself. Typically, that's going to be the case because the way a suppressor works, of course, we're cooling those gases down before all of that hits the atmosphere, and so it generates a ton of heat. And just so you guys know, typically on a suppressor, most of your heat is the hottest part is going to be right here where that primary blast baffle is, that area right in here. That's going to be the hottest part, although all of it can burn you. And it doesn't take much, especially with something like a 5.56. So when I first got into suppressors, I really didn't know if I even needed a suppressor cover. And then I got burnt once or twice and learned, hey, let's go ahead and get something. And one of the very first suppressor covers I ever bought was an Armageddon gear. And it was this one right here. Now this one's actually sold by Thunderbeast, but it's made by Armageddon gear, and it is meant for the titanium cans. It has this, it looks like a wool material, but it's a low temp, not meant for full auto fire or anything, and it has this bungee elastic string on it. And while it worked and it helped keep the mirage down and it kept you from getting burnt, this is not something that you would want to use for sustained fire. So Armageddon gear also offers what they call a high temp cover. Okay, so on a high temp cover, what it's going to do is it's actually going to be made out of different materials. You're going to see the uses of Nomex and Kevlar and things like that within the suppressor cover, but even this high temp cover here, and guys, these aren't cheap. These are going to run you $80+ or so plus shipping. I'm going to show you some of the damage that's occurred to this, even though this is a high temp cover from Armageddon gear. And most, unfortunately, most of the ones that I had I threw away, because once something gets to this point, it's just trash. I mean, it feels very, very brittle. It'll crumble. I'm going to show you some of the damage here. What you're going to see here, this was on a shorter rifle, and it was during a course of fire. It was during a qualification course, and we have to do about 100 rounds within just a few minutes. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but 100 rounds within just a few minutes, you're talking about 3 mags for the qual course, and this is what ended up happening. This right here was just the gas from the gas block. This right here is the heat, and it actually abraded. Now, it didn't break the Kevlar rope, if you will, but it burned straight through the suppressor cover, and it pretty much just melted this. So $80, but even though it's a high temp rated suppressor cover from Armageddon gear, this is pretty much junk at this point. I mean, it's still useful to have, but it's one of those things you need to understand the limitations of that. Now, when it comes to construction of suppressor covers, you have a bunch of different options. One of the cheapest options is getting something like a Weka like this. This is something I've had around forever, and this company was overseas. They were trying to bring them to the United States, and since then they actually are in the United States. But this is just basically high temp silicone tubing, and it is cut to length. It's offered in 2 different diameters. It's going to run, $25, and if I had a couple of these Cobalt cans, which I do, I could actually cut probably enough for 3 of them. So now I'm getting a suppressor cover for each for a very, very good value. These aren't going to melt. They're going to keep you from getting burnt. They do a decent job, and most of your silicone suppressor covers are going to have some type of elevated internal. You just basically use like hand sanitizing gel. You slide it over. That's the easiest way to get it on, or you could use an air nozzle and it just stays on. They stay put, they don't move until they get wet. If they get wet and you're in just really, really bad conditions, these can start to move or slide a little bit. Everything from just cheap wrap like this, guys, will work, but is it refined? Not really. This is something that can work itself loose over time, especially when they start lining the internal of this with high temperature, basically like exhaust wrap or anything like that. And it's one of those that if you don't put a suppressor on right, especially on your high powered rifle, you're going to sling it off the end. Okay, we've lost many a suppressor cover over the side of a precipice where basically you shoot and then boom, it's 100 yards down the mountain and you're not getting it, and that was just because of improper installation of it. And I'm going to go over that here in just a minute on how you should do that. Now, so you've got your regular high temp wraps, your cinch straps, you've got your silicone covers, but then you also have some other ones. Another notable mention, which I don't have an example of here at the moment, are the mantas. The manta is that's a hard use silicone cover. It can withstand a lot of high temps. It's actually ribbed on the outside. It has a unique look to it, but it does keep you from getting burnt. And even in their documents, they say don't do any more sustained or full auto fire than 100 rounds or so. It's not going to catch on fire. That's not the problem. It's just, you're containing all that heat within the suppressor. Suppressor needs to cool off, and they do have that caveat in there. You also have some other ones like Mod-Tac. Now, guys, that Mod-Tac really works. I've actually been exposed to those. I've used those, but those are going to be in that price point of $400+ for a carbon fiber cover that you pretty much have to integrate onto your AR, either off the front sight, or you're going to have to attach it to a Picatinny or something like that. And basically it floats over your suppressor itself. It actually lends itself to better cooling because nothing's actually touching the suppressor. But one of the things I did notice is if you try to use that for a lot of fire, you still get more mirage, sustained fire anyway. You do see more mirage, in my opinion, than I saw with some of these other ones. And it's because most of the thermal ports are on on the bottom and then it just wraps around and comes up, but it does kind of rise and keep it out of that center portion, but it's very, very expensive. So Mod-Tac is definitely one to take a look at if you're not worried about money or anything like that. You just want that look. Or you could just basically set screw it into the sides of your suppressor. There's also one by Magpul. While that's really great and it works well, I don't even know if they still make that. I know there were some issues with that slipping off because they were using aluminum collars, and basically when you get thermal expansion and contraction through high heat, that can start working itself off. It also made the diameter very, very large. So the other thing I want to talk about is some other notable mentions. Some of my favorites. You've got the Cole-tac suppressor covers. These kind of work. These just have a Velcro band that goes over it. I will tell you that these buckles do get hot enough. Anything that has a steel buckle, regardless of the manufacturer, when you get into steel buckles like this, it does get very, very hot even when you touch it. For the Area 419 on the Maverick, Cole-tac actually made these branded. They were Area 419, but that way if you configured it longer or shorter, you had different modules of length that you could actually configure it for that. Now, another one that, if you're a guy, you probably have a set of mechanics gloves and mechanics wear. They actually make suppressor cover. It's very, very cheap. They use a Carbon X material. It's $25. And yeah, that's it. It's 25 bucks. But it'll get you by, but it is very cheaply made. The only retention that you're going to have on this is, let's say, you've got it here, it's going to be on the back side. That's what keeps it from sliding forwards. It's only available in one length. When you pull down this high temp cinch strap, it does not tighten up anything else around the cover. But once again, it will keep you from getting burnt as long as it works with the length of suppressor that you're looking for. So $25, pretty tough to beat if you just have to have something. However, I will tell you, I've melted tons of those. Another thing too is they ship with this little white label on the inside. I've already cut this one off, but if you don't cut that off, it is going to leave a burn mark on your suppressor that you're never going to get off. It basically melts that to it itself. Another thing that they make is sometimes when you get done shooting, let's say you're at the range, you're at a training class, your suppressor is just so hot you can't touch it. I've stood many a rifle up in the passenger seat with the muzzle up so that the suppressor can cool. But Mechanics Wear also makes these bags like this that are high temp that you can actually just slide over, and it's a good way to keep it from burning any of your bags or anything like that. So here's a rundown of the suppressor covers, but there's one that has really notable mention. I get a ton of questions whenever I have them on the channel, and that's going to be the one by Liberty's Defense. Now, Liberty's Defense is American owned. It's a veteran owned as well as disabled veteran and LEO and female owned business. Okay, it's a husband wife. They make every one of these by hand, and they are by far, if you're looking for a hard use, full auto rated, just I don't want to worry about it, those are the covers to get. So the thing about the Liberty's Defense is they use 4 different layers. These are actually rated up to about 3,000 degrees with sustained fire at about 2,000 degrees. They actually use stainless steel cable and Kevlar to actually attach all 4 layers together. On top of that, they use a marine grade stainless cable that wraps around it with a snap clasp here, so that if you needed to basically take it off very quickly, you can just pull this, it releases, and now you can release the tension off of it and you can get it out of there. These are the best hard use suppressor covers I've ever used. However, price point's going to start at about $270 or so. All of the Kevlar and everything that you see on it is actually going to be mil-spec grade Kevlar. Once again, you're going to have metal parts on here. You can get burnt. They make them for pretty much everything. This is one for the Cobalt that's already out, and you guys can see how much it protects. I'm not going to be able to get burnt except I touch on the end of it or something like that, but it is a great suppressor cover. Now, the biggest issue that I see for someone that gets into stamp collecting and getting suppressors is they don't get the suppressor cover on properly, okay? So I'm not really worried about the end portion here as long as the rear is secure. And what I mean by that is guys, if you don't do it, what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up shooting it, and while you're shooting it, because everybody wants this to look cool in the end, this will actually come off, and if you don't shoot it, which I've never seen before, this will go down range, and hopefully you can retrieve it. But the biggest thing is making sure that it is cinched tight enough on the back side here, so that when you tighten this, whether it's a cinch strap, whether it's a snap clasp, you basically want it grabbing so that there is no possible way for this to go forwards, okay? So it can't go forwards. You know, like you said, in a perfect world, this would actually be the exact length. However, remember, mechanics wear only makes it to this length. It is what it is. One of the things I do like about this mechanics wear is they actually use a little metal cinch strap here, you know, a cinch buckle. You know, it does get hot, but it is one of those things that's not plastic. And like I said, that back portion is where the heat is. I also try to tuck the tails so that they're not just dangling. You don't want a snag point or anything like that. Now, that's the biggest thing. So if you'll see on most of the precision rifle cans that I've got, there's no way for it to actually slide over the front. And that's a problem when you get into cinch straps like this. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, but I think guys just put these on too loosely. They're not really tightening them down. I mean, guys, go ahead and put a lot of effort into it. It doesn't matter if it wrinkles it or whatever, but what you don't want is this to be able to move around. And so this one will actually, even with all that tension, I should be able to push it. Yeah, there it goes. So you can see how that just works off like that. Once it starts to work loose, I mean, it doesn't take much at all. Once it gets to about halfway or so, it's just going to come off, and that's usually what happens. Doesn't matter the manufacturer, they just slide out like that, and that's the disadvantage of these cinch straps. I almost wish that the companies would actually do another cinch on the back so you could tighten it over the front of that suppressor. Would make or the rear of the suppressor would make a huge difference. Now guys, since I did tell you what my favorite is, being the Liberty Defense, it will ship like this. There's dealers all over if you don't buy from them directly. It's got a little wax seal on it. It'll have the model that it was made for. In this case, this is one for a Thunderbeast Arms and Ultra 7 because I needed one because my other one burnt up. And so, guys, you can see how that's cinched around the backside. If I take this Ultra 7, and I'm not even going to kind of tighten it. There it is. And I might have to loosen up a little bit, but once I get it on there, that's where we would get the barrel through. And so this is going to be for precision rifle use. Of course, I'll be able to loosen this a little with the Kevlar strap, but that, man, I tell you what, if you just don't want to worry about it ever, just buy you a Liberty's Defense, and you just never have to worry about buying another one again. You'll be fine with it. But if you want something like that Bond-Tac, you could always do those as well. Like I said, this is why they have different models, different manufacturers, and you use what works best for you. But I'm one of those, I like to spend the money once and forget about it, not have to worry about it again. And for me, that choice is Liberty's Defense. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, it wasn't all inclusive, but it kind of gives you an idea of some of these suppressor covers and what you need to look for. Of course, I didn't include all of them. There's a ton of other great companies out there. If you're looking for cheap, some silicone tubing, high temp tubing from a company like Weka, that would work. You cut them to length and hopefully you can cut straight. You know, this is before I was able to get one of the Liberties. This was a Weka cover that the diameter fit for the Cobalt. And so it works. It's better than getting all of that heat. I'm not worried about burning myself. If you need something that's just a wrap, this is one from FASW. It works. And remember, the more suppressors you get, the more covers you're going to need, or at least be able to share some of that. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Like I said, it wasn't the most involved video, but I wanted to educate you guys on when you buy that suppressor cover, you don't end up with a melted one like I did because you bought the wrong one or you bought something that you thought that would work. And not everybody goes through sustained rates of fire. Not everyone shoots 500 rounds in, you know, X amount of time while they're at the range for training. You know, some guys are just out there, they're letting things cool, and in that case, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're a precision rifle shooter and you're shooting a suppressor on your rifle, unless it's a hunting application where you might be taking 1 or 2 shots, I would highly, highly recommend that you buy a suppressor cover to mitigate that mirage from your optics so you don't see that. And then, of course, not getting burnt. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'm still working on the videos for Victrix, still trying to get the edit done on the episode 3 of the Sub-MOA at 1 Mile Challenge. And there's a lot of other good stuff coming. I hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.